morning. This is Just Listen, hosted by George Goodman. Today is April 13th, 2026. Welcome to the podcast. And I want to make a plug for subscribing and maybe sharing the podcast with other people so that we can spread the word of Just Listen. Okay. Today, we want to talk about the U.S. federal government policy on the U.S. deficit. Haven't talked about this one for a while. I think that it's important because there's some key indicators going on that we need to have the discussion now so that we can evaluate why things are working out the way that they are currently in our great country of the United States of America. Okay, so some of you will not be surprised, but the national debt it fluctuates between 38 and 39 trillion dollars. Now, for this one, I want to skip around a little bit and pique your interest early. So this year, with the annual deficit, was projected to reach 1.9 trillion. Now that's just in 1 year. Now this is actually less than it was last year and the year before. A lot of the issues with the deficit, the experts are saying, are because of COVID. So we'll table that because depending on what you believe, and that was 6 years ago, so we came out of that in 2023 and 24. So now I could break down the deficit for you, but what I want to tell you is that the bottom line is if you look at this $39 trillion, for every citizen, that's $116,197. If everybody in the country, 330 million of us paid that, then we wouldn't have a deficit. All right, so here is the U.S. policy. I want to talk about first, though, what we did in the past. As you are aware, in the 1990s, we actually balanced the budget. Now, let's compare those two and then bring it together. So, during the Clinton administration and the Republican-controlled House, and the Democrats helped too, because it actually started, but then they lost the House of Representatives. But what they did was they worked together, something that's missing now. They eliminated the budget deficit through a combination of legislative acts, spending restraint, and a booming technology-led economy. All right. This led to the first federal budget surplus from 1998 to 2001. Okay, so here's what they did, and this is interesting. So they passed what they called the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993. So what they did was it was tax increases. It raised the top federal income tax rate from 31% to 39% and increased corporate and fuel taxes. That was first thing they did. Spending cuts included $255 billion in cuts over 5 years, primarily targeting defense and Medicare. That was their target. Impact. These measures slashed the deficit to its lowest level in 22 years by the end of Clinton's first term. All right. Then in 97, after the Republicans took over in the House, they had the Bipartisan Balanced Budget Act of 1997. All right. So during that time period, they had shutdowns and they negotiated a landmark agreement to eliminate the deficit by 2002. Okay, how did they do it? All right. So, spending reductions. It projected $127 billion in net savings over 5 years, largely through slowing the growth of Medicare payments to providers. Balanced compromises. Compromise. I'll say that one more time. Compromise. The deal included Republican priorities like a capital gains tax cut and Democratic priorities like the creation of the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, enforcement. It extended the pay-as-you-go rules, requiring that any new spending or tax cuts be offset elsewhere in the budget. Now, economic factors. A historic economic expansion in the late 1990s, which we know was in the tech industry, fueled high tax revenues. And what that means is when these new jobs were created, we created new people paying taxes. And since they were making more money, then we were getting in more money. Surplus revenue, so strong job creation. They projected 22.7 million jobs. And the stock market boom generated record tax receipts, particularly from capital gains and high income earners, what I just said. The other thing that they did, and keep in mind, this was with a conservative Democratic president and House and most of the Senate conservative Democrats. All right. Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act. This bipartisan law fundamentally changed welfare by requiring work and limited the time recipients could stay on assistance, contributing to a 60% reduction in the welfare rolls during the Clinton era. They also did the defense peace dividend. So defense spending fell from 4.3 to 2.9% in 2000. That's what they did, and within 6 or 7 years, they had balanced the budget. Now, I'm not saying that we should do it the same way. Things have changed. Now, here is what they are currently trying to do. This is what the current administration, Republican president, Republican House of Representatives, and Republican Senate. All right, so here is the strategy. Now, they want to focus on defense expansion, a massive proposed increase in total defense spending to $1.5 trillion in 2027, a 44% rise from previous levels. Non-defense reduction. Targeted cuts of roughly 10% to 21% on non-defense discretionary programs, including plans to eliminate the Department of Education. Tax and revenue. Permanent extension of tax cuts from 2025, One Big Beautiful Bill, which include deductions for tax and overtime, alongside efforts to use tariffs as a primary revenue offset. All right. Deficit targets. Growing momentum in the Senate for a 3% deficit to GDP resolution to stabilize long-term national debt. That was one of the things that I didn't really know about, but that's what they were trying to do to offset the cost. 3% deficit to GDP, that would bring the deficit down. All right, so here are the outcomes. So the debt has gone down a little bit, but that was based on the tariff revenue coming in. So they want to eliminate the Department of Education, which they cannot do. What that really means is that they cut off all funding, and then the states have to pick up the difference, meaning that the states control the education in their state. Labor, 18% reduction in job training programs and OSHA enforcement. Health and Human Services, 15%. targeted cuts in CDC, NIH, and community health centers. Housing, 14%. Decreased funding for Section 8 vouchers in public housing. EPA, 12% rollback of climate initiative and environmental enforcement. And then with Social Security, the policy shifts are base benefits are largely preserved. The budget proposes administrative efficiency and a work requirement for certain non-disabled Medicare recipients. Foreign aid. State Department faces 10% cut, primarily through reduction of international climate funds and multilateral aid. All right, so as you can see, if you look at both strategies, there is a balance of what needs to be cut. Every department takes a little bit of the cut. So if you look in the 90s, the biggest cuts came in defense spending. Now, we've changed that now, and currently in 2026, what they are saying is that education, that's what the states are supposed to be doing. And also in the Department of Education, they had no policy enforcement. The federal government didn't, and they would just give the states money. Now, some of the states are getting money from the Department of Education. So part of what they said wasn't true. What really stopped was in some states, probably about 15 or 16 of them, the states were asking for massive amount of money in education. One of those was Illinois. So that's what they're talking about for the current governor's race in Illinois. Now, agriculture, which is really just SNAP. But what I'm really saying is that Congress found a way to compromise. And if you look at the big picture with how much money we owe, then Congress has to make some hard decisions. And in the past, so there was a California Speaker of the House, I forgot his name, but they ran him out of town back before Johnson became the Speaker of the House. That's when it broke down with the House of Representatives doing a compromise. So the mainstream media, because I always get back to them eventually, are not showing this history. In the 90s, they proved that they could compromise and that everything had to take a hit to make the bigger picture better. And so that's what they're doing now with the current administration. But what seems like it's changed is that the Democrats have gone from conservative to progressive, and you can take that for what it is based on what they are doing. And for example, CDC, NIH, you're looking at also, they had people in the Weather Service who were studying the weather in Africa, Saudi Arabia, and the government was paying for that. That's why they made the cuts. And so my bigger point with cuts are they were cutting the international stuff. They weren't cutting the stuff that applied to the United States. See, that was the difference. So take a look at this and challenge the mainstream media to report the history and look at what we can do as a country if there's compromise in the House of Representatives. And as a voter, maybe we should want our elected representatives to compromise on certain things. This is Just Listen, hosted by George Goodman. Let me know what you think and have a great day.